Hey everybody! Today we are going to be learning how to animate a basic human walk cycle. My name is Jason Martinsen, and I've been a teacher at Animation Mentor for almost 20 years. I have a lot of different experience in film, VFX, and games. As you can see, if you go to jmartinsen.com, these are some of the projects I've worked on recently. The most recent project I animated and supervised was the David movie, which will be coming out next year sometime. I'll be using Maya and a human biped character from Animation Mentor. The rig is named Stella, and I'll be giving you a demo on how I will animate a walk cycle. So the first thing that you need to do when you start animating is get in your key poses. So the main important keys you need in a walk cycle are your stride keys, or the contact keys, and the down, which is the impact, and the mid-stride keys, which is the passing. You can also have the up. That's a key that I often add in when I'm blocking out a walk, and then the contact on the other side, which is essentially a mirrored version of the first pose. So it's only 4 keys per step. Usually a walk cycle is between 20 and 30 frames if you're animating at 24 frames a second. And you can just start out by laying out these keys and positioning them before you go into the next step. So here's another drawing. This is from Richard Williams' book. Now this is a bit caricatured. You can see how low they're going on the squash position and how high they're going on the passing position, and the up. It's almost like kind of a little bit of a hop. This is great if you're doing a more caricatured walk. This is like a caricatured example of some walks you can see here from 101 Dalmatians. So if you want to push the pose more in your walk, and you can get much more cartoony stuff, and that's fun to have. Here's some walk cycles that I've animated throughout my career with Jack and Daxter. You can see a little bit more stylized, like flopping back and forth. Obviously Shaggy. This is another angle of thumbnails of the key positions, which we'll talk about more, and you can see that we're gonna talk a lot about the rotation and Z and Y of the chest when we get into Maya. Okay, so here we are in Maya. I'm using the Stella rig. Here's the picker for Stella. I'm going to move it off the side in a moment. I just wanted to show you here. I have the select body control I use a lot to make sure everything's keyed and to mirror things. You can use the reset. There's obviously the FK/IK switchers. I'm going to be using FK arms. I find it's much easier to animate arm swings with FK. It's a lot less work. IK feet, and then the rest is pretty much default settings. Sometimes when I animate, I do like to leave the knee space in foot, because it allows whatever angle the foot is going for the knee to follow, which generally is less work than having it in world space. But obviously that is a personal preference, so you can figure that out on your own. So let's get started here. I'm just going to make this full screen. So I'll be selecting the NURBS curves with the picker that's off screen most of the time here. Notice that with this rig I hid some curves that I don't like to animate with. I like to keep my workspace cleaner, but you can obviously set this up however you like. My preferred setup for the walk is to have a front camera and a side camera, and then the graph editor down below. So the first thing we want to do is set up our stride key, right? So this is a pose that we're going to use for our basic walk stride, and some things I want to keep in mind on this is the hip control. If I zero this out, you'll see it translates up because it's lower down, and it rotates. Right now it's rotated forward a bit, 14 degrees to be precise, towards that front leg, okay? Because on the stride key, that's what you want. You want it rotated towards the front leg. I don't actually have any rotate Z here. The rotate Z happens on the mid stride, right? So these are the 4 keys, the 4 base keys of the walk cycle. It's just 4 keys here. the stride key and the mid stride. So it's just stepped right now. The feet are just sliding backward in space, right? And before I do more breakdowns, I want to show you how I set this up. So to start, you need to pose this out to get your pose how you want it. Obviously, if you wanted her to be more, proud or arrogant, you could, rotate her chest up and rotate her head back or whatever it is. If you wanted her to be more depressed, you could hunch her over or whatever you wanted to have. If you wanted her to be just like generally leaning back more, or leaning forward more, there's a lot of pose adjustments you can make in this base pose for your attitude, like we talked about when you're caricaturing. But this is going to be just more of a basic vanilla walk. So once I get this pose, I want to make a mirror of it for the next stride pose, which is already done here, but I'm going to show you how you can do it. 2 ways you can do it. So the first one is to take this stride key and just copy it over to the mid stride. In this case, this is a 24 frame walk, so the stride key would be at 0, 12, and 24, right? And so now, as you can see, these are identical. Now there's 2 ways you can do this. A really fast way is if you use Animbot. There's just a button you can push. It's like a mirror. So if I click this, bloop, it mirrors the pose for you. Pretty nice to have. A lot of studios you work at will do that. And that's the easiest way. But you don't have to do it that way. You can actually copy the key over, right? So this is the same position again. And then you can flip things manually. So I know, for example, on this stride key, I'm going to want this to be not -14, but 14. Right? And you can just go up through the controls and see what controls in your rig have values on it. So these are 9 and 2, so it would be -9 and -2. And then this one, you can do the same. The other way to do it is to take your rotate curves and select them, and here you can do times equals -1, and it'll multiply these curves in reverse. Oh, actually, sorry, you don't want to do it for the whole thing. You just want to do it for these ones. Times equals -1. So now it just flipped the values of that one curve, right? And that's actually pretty useful for a lot of your things. So this would be -2. And then for the arms, you can just copy one side to the other if you wanted to. But I actually leave the arms to the end. I usually just animate one arm and copy it at the very end, right? So, I mean, this curve I can copy and then paste it onto this one. And now it's a reverse, right? And then this one I can copy. Well, I already don't need to do that, actually. Yeah, sorry. This one I can copy here and then paste it onto this one. And those just flip automatically. For the feet, it's a little bit tougher. If you copy this curve and you paste it on the other foot, you can see that it doesn't quite work because the translate X needs to be actually flipped and the rotate Y needs to be flipped. And now it's the same. You can see they're exactly the same. So then the same would be true for the other foot. So you can copy this value, select the other foot, paste it, and then again -5 here in this case, and +9. So essentially, I've mirrored it manually. It took a little bit longer, but that's how you can do it. If you don't have the Animbot tool or a mirroring tool, I think there are other mirroring tools online. There might be some free ones. Now, to get the breakdown key, you can just pose it out if you want, but you also can just use the Maya's in-between, linear in-betweener, right? So you can see that that pose isn't quite right, but it's sort of close-ish. So this is the stride for this right leg. So on frame 6, which is the middle, you would want 0 foot roll action. You'd want the foot to have no rotation and just be right on the ground moving backward. And the other foot is passing, right? So essentially you just rise it up, you know, rotate it down. And then this is a point where you do want to have some translation in X and some rotate Z, right, to get a little bit of that weight as this leg takes the weight onto this hip. As the leg is taking the weight, that hip will rise up, and then as the next leg takes the weight, that hip will rise up, and you get this like swing back and forth from the hips, right? And you can see it right now. This is all linear curves, but you can see it's like swings that way, swings back forward again. All right, the next step is to add the breakdown keys. So the first breakdown key is after the stride key is the contact. So this foot would be linearly moving back, and it would have flattened on the ground, right? So you want to have the body starting to come down, the hip starting to rotate up. Maybe the body's starting to come over. You can figure that value out later with based on your mid stride. And the back foot will be coming backwards, right? Starting to come backwards. So you're going to get something like this. The back foot will start to peel off more, so you can use the foot roll more, or you can actually start to use the toe raise and come off the foot roll, right? These are combinations with this rig. Or you can actually come off the foot roll and rotate the foot up in X and translate it so it peels off. Getting the exact peel off point I'll talk about later, but essentially this is going to be happening in the body, right? And there's going to be a little bit of rotation happening in the chest, maybe some translation up because it's starting to drag before the compress, but that will be figured out more in splining with your breakdown pose. So that's an important breakdown you need to have from here to here, right? So once you get that breakdown, then the next breakdown is the high point, and that will come after this mid stride. And in that case, we're going to be translating the body up, right? Mostly, and the foot will come forward. So it looks something like this, right? You can see I've translated the body up a little bit more than the foot can handle. So the foot locks out, and that's why I'm adding a little bit of foot roll here, just so the knee doesn't pop out. So you can see it's just these breakdowns, the taking the weight, passing position, and then the high point. And these are all the keys you need in a walk cycle. So there's just 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's back to the initial one. So it's essentially 5 frames for each stride. And it looks something like this. And this is on step still. So it already is feeling pretty good, right? And at this point, I want to start splining, right? So at this point, I take all these curves, select everything, and I just push auto tangent, right? But not for everything. For the feet translation, the foot that's going backwards needs to be linear curves. So you can either select all these and make them linear, and to be safe, I delete these keys and be in the middle to make sure that it is moving completely linearly back, right? You can see if you want to break this tangent here, so that way you get a smooth flow into that if you want your curve to look pretty. But really the peel off part, which is these keys around here, is going to be dealt with more frame by frame once we start the walk actually going forward in space. So you got to do that on both sides. So the translate Z back on the other leg also needs to be linear to frame 12. It's just the first 12 frames on either side. And so now the walk cycle will start to sort of work. It still needs polish, but basically all the important information is there. I even added some overlap in the pigtails, which I haven't fine-tuned yet. And this is where I'm going to start figuring out everything. So starting with this the hips and stuff, we're going to notice what's happening here on the graph editor. The rotate Z curve, now again, if you're going to have this walk cycle, you need to make sure these curves align. So if you go to the curves post infinity and you cycle, then you can see it and make sure you have view infinity on. View infinity. And you can see now what's happening before and after this, right? So if these are flat tangents, it's not going to have a nice line of action there. But that's the Z curve of the hip. So you can see on the frame 6 in this case and 18 are the extremes. They're the passing positions where the hip is essentially rotated the most from side to side, because she's doing a female walk, so we're getting a little bit of swing. The male walk is got the same values more or less, but it's just toned down. And the male walk, usually the feet are farther apart, and the translate Z is more. I mean, very quickly we can do a version of that. You know, you can see this is just a rough walk right now. But if I take this curve and tone this down quite a bit, and take the translate X curve, which also, see, it needs curve work, and just push the spline tangents, and we just scale this up so that the back and forth is a lot more. And then we take the feet and translate them much farther out. What value is that roughly? 4. Right. And now it's going to feel like a bit of a waddling, large obese person walk, but you can see it's not as feminine of a walk right now, right? So we can just undo all that stuff. Go back to our walk. And then you just check all your curves. You know, your translate X, translate Y. Again, these need to be cycling nicely, so you just have to make sure they're all smooth. And if you want to adjust anything at this point, this is a good time to do it. You can also clean up the curves if you want. You can literally delete those. Anything in the middle if you want. So I could delete all of these curves, right? And it's just a cleaner curve. And then you go up the body and see where anywhere else has keys on it that needs adjustment. And you check them. This is the spine. So you can see there's a translate on the spine I've added. And I just want to show you what this does. I'm going to exaggerate this translate. So you can take the translate Y curves on these two movers, which are on the chest. Or actually, it's just one mover, I think. Yeah, it's just one mover I did it on. And you can see what happens when I move this up and down, right? It squashes and stretches the body. So if I exaggerate this curve a lot, now you can see boing, boing, right? There's like a bounce happening that's a little bit offset to her up and down of her hips. And that's a nice touch to add, but much less than that, clearly. And again, you could just take the translate Y curve from the hips, which looks like this. And I think this would actually, I would finesse this a bit. I would probably take this top here and pull these out so you get a little more hang time. And if you want, you can even tighten the bottom to get a little more bounce up. And then the up and down is going to have a little more texture. It's going to come up, hang time, boom, 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 right? So that can be a nice feeling in the walk, a little more weight. You could make these linear even. It would adjust this value here. You'd have to move this up a bit to match. And if you want it to be exactly, you can find out the value is here, negative 3.054. Negative 3.054. Now it totally matches the other stride. And now, I mean, we can exaggerate these too. Oops. Now it's going to have even more of that poof, 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 right? And this is just up to you. I think maybe this is a bit much, so I would probably soften the bottom a little bit, maybe tighten it a touch. And then, you know, you can start at this point adding the head. The other thing that's happening here is the upper body is rotating in opposition of the hips. So here the hips are rotated 14 degrees, and you know, again, if we exaggerate this, you can really see what's happening in the hips, forward, you know, and backward with the legs. So what's happening in the upper body is the opposite of that. If we look at the rotate Y curves here, right, and again we can clean these up and delete these. I'm going to exaggerate this value. And you can see whatever's happening in the hips, the upper body's doing the opposite of. Swing, swing, right? So that's important to get this opposing force. The chest and the hips are doing the opposite things from each other. And then on the head, if you want, you can add, and I don't think I have any animation on the neck here. Oh, there's just a little bit of rotate Y. But on the head, you can add a little bit of X, right? And again, I'll exaggerate this curve. You can see what it's doing. It's just like a nice offset to the walk. So you just have it going down as the body's going up, and then up as the body's going down, and you just find a nice offset there to make it work. I have a little bit of rotate Z as well. As she comes across this direction, I rotate her head back. So again, I'll exaggerate this curve and you can see what it's doing. So you get a little bit of this. You don't want to do too much. This is subtle, but it helps. It adds a little bit of nice organicness to the walk. And then what I like to do before I get into the cleanup of the legs, because that's the most technical part, is the arm swing. So the arm swing, usually what I do is I just take one arm and I actually delete all the curves on it. So it's not even animated. And if I want, I can just move it out of the way. So it's just not even visible. And I animate the other arm, right? So let's go to perspective view for a second, just because it's nice to see what's going on from different angles with the arm swing. Now, the first thing to do with the arm swing is the upper arm. And this is an FK. So again, we can delete all these other curves, and you just position how far forward and how far back do you want this arm swing to be. Like, do you want it to go farther back than this? Delete all these other curves. So it's just two keys. Do you want it to go farther forward than this? You know, from the front view. Do you want it to cross over her body a little bit? And again, this comes down to your reference. Do you want it to be out? There's a lot of different ways to do arm swings, but the main hinge is this. And once you've got that feeling more or less right, I like to go in and make these tangents, because right now if they're just flat, I like to take these tangents and pull them out, right? So you get a nice speedy transition, and then hang time, rather than whoop, 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 whoop. It's like fast, slow, and it just feels like more weight. So once you're happy with that movement, the kind of back and forth swing movement, then you can go and add the overlap. So let's just zero this out for a second. So now this arm isn't doing anything, right? And this, you just figure out, like usually as the arm goes back, we want to have it drag this way. And then as it starts to go forward, it will drag this way. And that's a pretty simple curve. Make sure that the tangents align nicely, because they were flat right here, so they didn't work quite right. And that's a pretty basic overlap, and you can see now that feels pretty nice. I didn't have to do almost anything there, and it just works. Same thing with the wrist. It's just a few frames later, right? If I delete all these curves, as it goes back, you want it to be dragging a bit this way, maybe. And then as it comes forward this way, you can drag it back that way. And you have a nice overlapping hand if it's a relaxed walk. If its fist is clenched, you wouldn't do hardly any of that. So once you have that one arm, well, the last thing is important, the shoulder. So with the shoulder, what I like to do is make sure that you can see on the back, this is the default. I like to bring the shoulder back a little bit, and on the forward, I like to bring it forward a little bit, right? So then, if you want, on the mid stride, I can delete some of these. On the mid stride, you'll notice here I have a little bit of rotate Z. And what the rotate Z does is move the shoulder up and down, right? So from the front view, as she goes up, the shoulder's dropping. So you're getting a little bit of this happening along with this swing. So it's down, up, down, up, down, up, right? You don't have to do that. It could just be swinging back and forth, but it adds a nice arc. So once you have all those keys working, you feel happy with your arm swing on your one arm, You can look at it from your front view, and you look at it from your side view. Well, this is the wrong side, but you can sort of feel it. Then it's very simple. You just copy these curves. And I do this with the legs too, actually. I just animate one leg, getting it perfect. So I copy these curves, all of them, select them in the same order. So shoulder first, I selected it, and then upper arm, forearm, hand, right? And there's no keys on this arm right now, but if I just paste this, now they're identical, right? The arms are doing the exact same thing, which is kind of a funny walk. It's like someone's warming up for a workout. But because this walk cycle is cycling, all you have to do is figure out that cycle and offset it by half the amount of frames, in this case 12. And now it's a perfect mirror of the other side, and I didn't have to do any work. Once I'm done, I want to make sure I bake this down or have keys here, right? So it's not going to be, there's not going to be keys off the frame range, so I can just key bake simulation, bake for that arm, and then after frame 24, I just delete all these keys. And then if I want to clean that up, I can simplify the curve, and it keeps the same values without so many keys. But again, it's not going to match perfectly this one. This one's even simpler, you see, because of the way I baked it. You could go down and delete these curves, and now it pretty much matches perfectly. And you can see there's a translation value here. Make sure it's linear. So she's actually walking forward in space. So the feet that are flat on the ground are not sliding at all. You can see they're stuck, even though they are moving back in space. The linear curve forward is moving the same amount. You can see that this translation curve goes from 33 to negative 33, which is 66 frames, which means that this root curve goes from 0 to positive 132, which is 66 times 2, because it's 2 strides. So simple math. But the foot is still sliding quite a bit on the release, because obviously we just have this key here and this key here on the peel off. So I just like to zoom in and check it out. You can see it just doesn't lift off nicely, right? So usually I want to keep it back a few more frames. And you can either like copy this curve value over and add more foot roll, maybe a little toe raise. But generally, I like to just do it by hand, and I kind of like the fact that the foot roll is just kind of blending out. So probably by here, I don't want any foot roll. Zero that out. So I just go zoom in and I just look where the foot is, and I just start to track it. I rotate it back an X here, and just eyeball it. You can see now it feels like it's starting to peel off. So then this frame, the same thing. A little more rotate X. You can see it's just now pivoting off the point. And then at some point it does need to move forward. So you could probably start moving it forward here. And then it can swing forward. So it's pretty, just the 2 or 3 frames that you need to just finesse that little peel off, right? And then the walk is working great. And you just do the same thing on the other side, right here, which has already been done. So then your walk is working pretty good. You've mirrored the arms. You can see that I've baked one arm on every frame because it's just copied and offsetted the keys. Again, if I want it, I can simplify this curve, make it cleaner. But everything is there now. I feel like I have a nice working walk, and I just want to go through and make sure there's no knee pops by framing through. And if there is any knee pops, you can fix them usually with the foot roll, right? But it is nicer to look at the knee pops by looking at the animation walking in space. So again, I'll just mute this curve. Mute selected, and now you can see she's just walking in space. So you can see there's still a couple little knee pops in there that we can smooth out, right? So you can use the ball roll if we want. You can use the hip control. Right here, there's one, so maybe here you'd want a little bit more foot roll, and here a little bit less foot roll, and now you can see that that is blending smoother. And then this frame, it starts to come forward. It doesn't move forward as much, then it moves forward again, right? So on this frame, you could use more foot roll, or as long as we keep that foot in the same place, we could just translate the foot forward and pivot it back. and now you can see that's blending off nicer. There's another pop right here, so that's solved by just maybe bringing this leg down a little bit on this frame so it's straighter. Probably bring it down a little bit on this frame, and then I would have it up a little higher on this frame. And then that front leg has been fixed. Now again, I could copy that curve over to the other leg if I wanted, and then offset it. That's like the easy way to do it, right? So if I want to copy this, I take the other leg, delete everything, paste it. I have to make sure that this value is 5 and the y is -9, and then I take these curves and I move them. Make sure the cycle is cycling, move it, oops, and I move everything. Why is it all not moving? I guess that's all that's important. Yeah, just move everything 12 frames, and now both feet are fixed. I still see a little pop in there right here. I wonder why that's not happening on the other side. Oh, I guess it still is a bit. But we can fix that manually. So again, I'll edit, keys, bake simulation, and then delete everything after frame 24, since we've already done some other fixes, and then just fix that pop on both sides. So under the settings, you can turn on the hip control or the bend bows. Both of them are nice options to have for this. So basically on this frame, if you want, you can just key the hip a little bit higher, right? So it doesn't pop as much on that frame. And then maybe over 2 or 3 frames it'll blend in. But then you have a nice smooth walk, it's fixed, and at this point I like to make it a walk forward in space, and I'll tell you why. If you want to make it a walk forward in space, it's quite simple. You see the value of the translate Z, which was, I believe, 132, sorry. And you just delete this, you don't need this. And you make an anim layer. This is the quickest way to do this. And on this anim layer, you select, obviously, the body and the feet, because there's what's going to move forward. And you just say Add Selected Objects. You set a key on Z, and you go to the last frame, and you do plus equals 132. Everything moves forward. You can make sure that's linear. And now it's essentially the same thing. It's walking forward in space, but now you take this and you merge the layers down. So it will go down and merge with the layer below. So now there is no walk in space. You can see the body is actually walking forward. Each frame, the body's moving forward, the linear curve. And the feet are now, when they're on the ground, the curve is flat. So she's actually walking forward in space. And this can be very helpful because if you want, you could have the character like step up onto a, a higher point. So like if there was a rock or a hill or whatever, this character would step up onto it and then keep walking up, walk back down. If you want to slow down the walk, the feet won't be sliding. There's lots of uses for this. If you want to do a walk to stop, it's quite easy with this, right? A walk to stop, when your keys are in world space, you just take your translate Z curve and at some point you just slow it down. And you can see now she comes to a stop. And so at that point you just have to make sure that your feet go to a nice position for that and doesn't have any foot roll there at the end. And then the other foot that comes forward just comes forward to a point that feels natural for a stop. And now you can see the arms obviously need to probably be zeroed out as well a little bit. I mean, this is a really quick example of it. And the hips you want to have probably end up standing up a little bit straighter. but you can also like lean the character as they're walking forward, lean the character back a little bit to slow down, and then come to a stop. So this was a very rough version of that. It took about 1 minute, as you saw, but there you go. You have a character coming to a stop. So there you go. That's a basic humanoid walk. I hope you enjoyed the demo.